Welcome. My name is Aubrey Hersh, and I'm an historian who for the past 20 years has taken groups to Europe in order to teach them history in the places where the events actually occurred. About 2 years ago, I started a podcast called History for the Curious, and in many ways, that is what today is about. History for the curious. Let me start by introducing you to a country with a history so powerful, so important, that we brought you across the world in order to see it. Over the next few days, we will be visiting 3 specific cities with 3 specific stories: Segovia, Madrid, and Toledo. But in order to understand these stories, we need to ask a question that has been asked almost since time immemorial. What does it mean to be a Jew? What is Judaism? How has it survived for so long? The answer, incredibly enough, is to be found in the 1,500 years of Spain's Jewish history. Our nation has an unbreakable and eternal identity, expressed by the most famous verse in Judaism: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is one. Know that God exists. But critically, the Shema not only tells us that there is one unchanging God, but gives us an instruction how we attach ourselves to God. Not simply words, but a moral code to love God with heart, soul, and mind. Over the centuries, that sentence has infused life with meaning, with choice. It has forged the connections of heart, soul, and mind. And over the next few days, we will visit 3 cities. Each will bring one of these to life: heart, soul, and mind. That which the Kabbalists call nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The connection which the Shema identifies as b'chol levavacha, with all our loyalty, b'chol navshecha, the choices of life and death, b'chol ma'odecha, the truth of Judaism, the value system of a Jew. As we will see, the choices made here in this country centuries ago have allowed the Jewish people to exist, to continue to live with the values of selflessness, of self-sacrifice, ordinary people who became heroes. And once we are aware of our past, we can ask ourselves what choices we will make when we will build our future. Let's meet Spanish Jewry. Not long after the temple was destroyed in Jerusalem nearly 2,000 years ago by the Romans, Jews were brought to this country, partly as slaves, partly as traders. And eventually, unusually, this land became partly Muslim and partly Christian. Eventually, starting right here in the city in which we are, Spain became a Catholic land and the Jews became a target. With no rights and no protection, they were subject to discrimination, to isolation, and to attack. Yet, by the 1300s, hundreds of thousands of Jews lived across the country. They lived, they built, they brought children into the world. They were active in science, in trade, and in education. But in 1492, a terrible decree was visited upon all those Jews: expulsion. Every man, woman, and child was to be driven from their homes, their cities. Where to? To nowhere. Of course, they could always save themselves by making the choice to convert to Christianity. take the painless route, remain in this land, retain all their possessions, their houses, their fields, and keep their children safe from physical attack at least. But the choice required one thing: the betrayal of everything. Everything that was true, to betray God, to betray your religion. A choice of loyalty that would affect the next 500 years of history. Would we have had that strength to choose? What gives you that strength? One man, the finance minister to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, Don Yitzchak Abarbanel, a brilliant man and a scholar of tremendous note, fearless, courageous, he told Spanish Jewry that they had to leave and take the path of exile, become a refugee, and through that, truly keep Judaism alive. And this man, whose writings and works are to be found in the house of every religious Jew today, whose writings are as relevant now as when they were first authored, was no stranger to making that choice. 3 times in his life, he abandoned everything in order to hold on to his Judaism. B'chal levavacha, with all his emotions, with all his heart, with all his loyalty. In 1472, he became the advisor to King Alfonso of Portugal and a leader of the Jewish people, a man of great wealth and great knowledge, open-minded and open-hearted. But in 1483, a new ruler came to the throne, and in the middle of one night he was told that the king wanted him dead, and were he to remain here for 24 hours, they would be his last. So he fled overnight, a man of wealth, of position, suddenly a penniless refugee condemned to death. And he recorded all of his story in his own writings. We will encounter him and more of his story in Segovia today. Segovia. The choices there were not limited to 1492, the year of the expulsion. 1,300 years earlier, the Jews were witness to Roman creativity, an aqueduct that functioned for over 1,000 years, built in the 1st century at exactly the same time that the Jewish temple in Jerusalem was being destroyed, a triumph of Roman superiority, the empire that ruled the world and would rule forever. Look at the pitiful exiled Jews and the might of superior Rome. It would have been appropriate to ask, who will be around 2,000 years from then? And the answer would have been, should have been, obvious. The Romans. Yet, despite the predictions and against all the odds, the Jew remains, the Romans are long gone. Think about that. Think about that when you view the incredible ingenuity of Roman know-how later today. Why did they disappear, and how did we persevere? There are big decisions that we will all learn about the choices that were once made in this land, in Segovia, in Madrid, and in Toledo. In Segovia today, we will see the choices of the heart of loyalty. I recall many years ago being on a train when I was roughly your age, and one row behind me, there were 2 people talking disparagingly, belittling the Jews. Back then, I didn't know much, but I knew enough, and the question was, would I stand up both figuratively and literally for my people? Would I be loyal? I have to admit I didn't, but I should have. When emotion or convenience pulls us one way and loyalty demands otherwise. Returning finally to that terribly difficult choice of 1492, how many Jews were loyal? As we'll see today, tens of thousands of Jews converted, became Catholics, hoping that someday, somehow, they would revert. But on mainland Spain, none remain today as Jews. They were wiped out as surely as if they had been put to the sword. There is a description written by an eyewitness of those who left. They went along the roads and over the fields in much misfortune, and wherever they went, the Christians invited them to be baptized. Some, in their misery, did so and remained, but few, very few. And the rabbis continually gave them strength and told the women and girls to sing and play tambourines to raise the people's spirits. So the Sephardim left Spain with music filling their ears. It was an exodus like the one that God had carried out in Egypt 2,500 years earlier. God would eventually provide miracles and lead his loyal nation from servitude to the promised land, even if the journey would be centuries long. Choice is a very powerful tool. We need to know how to use it. Be aware of its power, because loyalty requires commitment, and in return, it gives you life.